eventually, when he completed his suicide, it was very hard for everybody because no one was aware that he had been struggling.
Somebody calls 911, right? We go to everybody's worst day in their life. But you always take a little piece of that, right? And then you have to go home and still navigate your life. And I think sometimes we feel that unless it's a traumatic call, we should be able to deal with it. You know, there's that expression, you know, that we use sometimes is, you know, don't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm.
I always relate it now, like we all wear backpacks, these invisible backpacks our whole life. And you know, we put in our traumas and our everything, our feelings in there and so forth. And eventually, if you don't deal with the backpack and like loosen the load, eventually you tip over.
In this special episode of Rise and Thrive, we're diving into the stories of resilience, recovery, and the quiet battles too many men face alone. This episode is brought to you by our title sponsor, Brain Armor. Visit brainarmor.com and use the code RISE and THRIVE to receive 50% off your order. Let's open the door to healing together.
And welcome back to Rise and Thrive. It's the podcast where we dive into powerful conversations about mental health, well-being, and resilience. I'm Tad Michaels, very special guest joining us today, and I'm so very much looking forward to having this conversation with Derek Baranowski. He's a career captain with the Burlington Fire Department, and in his spare time, a facilitator for the Working Mind program through the Mental Health Commission in Canada, and a mental health advocate. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Derek, it's an honor, and I appreciate you helping us out with this podcast. And, you know, we've been friends for a while, and I really appreciate what you and the rest of your team does for Burlington and our society. And, you know, we're really looking forward to telling us about your journey, how you got into this, and any insights you have for us as it relates to mental health.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to having this conversation with both of you. I think there's been some really exciting changes in our industry and stuff, and again, I'm a big advocate for it, so anytime I can talk about it and the changes that we've made in our industry, I think it's great. So thanks for the opportunity.
So let's talk first of all, the obvious question. You're a captain with the Burlington Fire Department, but what led you to take the initiative to form the peer support team to help out your fellow co-workers?
Well, great question. It actually wasn't my initiative to do it. In fact, a lot of the credit goes to our association. The International Association of Firefighters, our own local, Burlington Local 1552, the professional firefighters, along with the department, recognized that we had a unique opportunity to support our firefighters at the internal level. You know, we've always had resources, right? Just like a lot of other organizations have, you know, employee family assistance programs. We have things like benefits to help us deal with anything that we might be dealing with from a mental health standpoint. But there's always been a lot of stigma in using those. And what they've realized is that there was a lot of data that suggested that if we could have some internal champions, firefighters that we could talk to when someone needs some support to say, hey, I need to have a conversation, you know, I'm looking for some resources. Someone that's comfortable and trained to have those conversations and then be able to redirect them to the right resources. And that essentially is what a peer team, support team is. We're not clinicians. We do not counsel.
Right.
Nobody has the qualifications to do that. It's someone who is a mental health care advocate who has some training on how to navigate difficult conversations with firefighters and their families. But the most important thing is to be able to redirect them to the right resources. Right. Be a content expert on what's available, not just here in our organization, but also in the community, in the GTA, provincially, federally, everywhere.
We met in high school, and it seemed in high school, you know, he was your typical 6'4", 300-pound football player. So, you know, we don't talk about if we're upset or sad, we just get angry. And as the years went on, that kind of just was what everybody kind of knew about Tom. And it didn't really change for him in terms of sharing any of his fears or his concerns with anyone other than, I would say, with me as his partner. A lot of his family wasn't aware of any struggles that he was having. A lot of his friends weren't aware. And so eventually, when he did finally go get help from a doctor and get diagnosed with depression, or at least put on antidepressants, and then eventually when he completed his suicide, it was very hard for everybody because no one was aware that he had been struggling.
What were kind of the, if you will, the signals where you knew, and you talked about Tom sharing his feelings with you, but what was some of the things that you picked up on, or maybe he shared, that you thought to yourself, you know what, I think you got a problem?
To be honest, I think, because this was, 14 years ago, I think that I don't necessarily think I knew as much about mental health and about how it can impact someone, and how some of those aggressive and angry outbursts could actually be signs of depression, or on a day when, it was very hard for him to get out of bed to go to work. Those signs of depression versus him just being tired or lazy like we used to think. So I think it took a while for either of us to really think that it was something other than that.
You mentioned that they put him on antidepressive medication. Did it help?
It did. I think it worked really well for a while, but I also think part of Tom's struggles, and again, this is my perception of it.
Of course.
I think part of it was a little too late for him. I think he was the kind of guy that was really strong and confident, and if he wasn't going to win a fight, he wasn't going to go in the fight. And so I think he was doing everything he was supposed to do. He was speaking online with an anonymous phone counselor. He had seen his family doctor who had put him on antidepressants. They were working, and then for a couple of days before everything happened, they weren't working. He had a couple of rough nights. And so I think what I believe for him is that in his mind, maybe at that point it was, I'm not going to beat this, or this is going to continue to be a thing for me. So as a family, I've had a few of his family members remind me that this all could have happened a lot sooner had him and I not worked through it, had him not gotten some of that help. But I think that for him specifically, I think it was just one of those, I equate it to stages of cancer.
On a random Sunday afternoon in 2022, I was just driving home for Fortino's and got what I thought was a heart attack. Turned out to be a doozy panic attack, but never having that before in my life, I didn't know what it was, right? And just driving home, and like the world was just shaking around me. And my wife was home at the time with her girlfriend. They were having a spa day, and I ran to the bedroom and tried to calm down, and it just, another surge would happen, and jumping in the shower and trying to cool off and trying everything I could. But by the time I just said, okay, I just called an ambulance and went to the hospital. That's the tricky part with panic and anxiety attacks, is that it makes you feel like a heart attack, right? And if you don't know, and you go to the doctors, and I was in the hospital for, let's say, 7 hours doing different tests. They said, Nelson, everything checks out, we can send you home. I still didn't believe them. Even when I went home, because I was off work, it ended up being about 4.5, 5 months, because I was having daily anxiety attacks. It's kind of like the big earthquake and then the tremors, right? So being bedridden for the first couple of weeks, I went to 12 different walk-in clinics around Halton because I just didn't believe what the doctors were telling me.
what was the trigger for you to start Capillary Wave?
In June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and when I was going through my thing, like I didn't tell anybody, etc. So I just put
Typical
a post.
guy thing.
Oh yeah, right. I just put a post on Facebook, and I'm like, here's what's been going on with me, and the amount of feedback that I got was amazing. Support messages and all that kind of stuff, right? And that kind of started the road of, I'm not keeping anything in anymore. If someone asks me how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, I'm gonna tell them, right? And one thing led to another. Like, I read a friend of mine from high school, she recommended a book for me to read, and it was called From Panic to Power. And I read this thing in 2 days. And I hadn't read a book since high school probably, right? But I read this thing in 2 days, and it was like I wrote it. So that cemented the fact, okay, this is what I have now. And that started my journey, and I call it my journey back to me, right? Because those 5 months sucked. You know, it was depression, it stole everything from me. Right. Like my sense of humor is my default switch, and I didn't want to do any jokes or make people laugh. I just wanted to be a hermit in bed, you know? But I started my journey back to me, so I learned coping skills like journaling. And I'm like, journaling? What am I going to write about, right? And then I just decided I'm just going to write. And I just kept writing, and that really helped. Going for walks, daily walks. I had a psychotherapist. And then about a year later, my faith is a big driving force of my life. So I was at church and I saw this little bulletin that said small prayer group. And I went to it, and it was just adults sitting around talking. And I left there and I'm like, well, that feels pretty good. Like, you know, I felt good. So I'm like, I wonder if guys want to sit around and talk about mental health and life. And I put out another post in the Burlington Dads group. And we had 5 guys come out to our first meeting.
How emotional can some of these sessions be for you and the people taking part? Because I know that there's stuff in there. I don't know if they were talking about suicide or suicide ideation or something like that somebody's gone through, but there must be times where you leave these sessions going home totally spent.
Yeah, early on for sure. We've had everything come to our table. Brain cancer, suicide ideation, everything has come through. And it was a load in the beginning. Now I've learned more, and like I now have the ability, I don't know, I've learned to not accept, that's not the right word, but I've learned to navigate. Nothing's gonna get fixed at the table, right? It's just the beginning of fixing. It's the beginning of healing. So
take that first step.
Yeah, because us guys, you know, there's something broken, we're gonna go fix it, you know, we're gonna put a 2x4 there, whatever it is, right? There's no, that's Portuguese engineering, the 2x4, by the way.
Well, there's a story there too.
Everything is 2x4s. But there's no fixing right there, but it's the beginning of the healing process.
Today, Capillary Wave has 184 members. And in addition to the in-person group, they have an entire team to help support men.
So we have a group of therapists in our, that offer a variety of modalities, because it's not one size fits all. To the guys who can't afford therapy, finances is not a barrier. We provide free therapy for the guys. The ones that do have insurance, awesome. You know, here's a great group of therapists. We have the in-person support groups that we run 3 nights a week. We have a employment services team. We have a family law partner, mindfulness coaches, business coaches, finance.
You know, it was a great place for me to kind of meet amazing people kind of going through similar situations or kind of in the same situations that I've been through, like, you know, depression, anxiety, isolation over the years. So it was kind of like in a community, it felt like it was kind of home.
It helps me to share my story with others, but also helps to hear what other people are going through and understand like I'm not alone when it comes to the mental health kind of stuff. It's become very important to me to kind of break the stigma.
Stresses and anxieties, a lot are life-orientated, can't change them. It's managing the emotions that come with it. And some of the other guys, we say the elders, the wisdom here, can share back to the younger ones that, hey, I'm not telling you I know everything, but I'm just telling you this so you don't have to go through it.
Andrew, you're a new recruit. I guess you've been in the firefighter for a year now?
Yep.
What happened when you applied? What did they, or not even when you applied, when you got accepted to be a firefighter, what kind of training did it give you as it relates to mental health?
It was our first or second day on the job.
Second day?
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember Derek was one of the first captains I actually met in the recruit training, and we talked about mental health. And we went over that for the whole day. And come around to the end of the recruit class, we actually had the opportunity for our families and significant others to come in and learn more, and it's a way for everyone to be involved, which I thought was amazing.
That's what. So, second day, obviously you used it
I've been on 29 years.
29 years?
Yeah.
Did you have training on your second day?
Absolutely zero training on mental health. And I remember the first time someone went off on mental stress. Right. I was just a few years into the job, and it was something like, everyone was shocked. Oh, this is crazy. Right. Absolutely crazy. And he was on the job for over 30 years, and it was career ending for him. It was done.
Wow.
But we had never experienced or heard of that before. Yeah. Fast forward just a few years, the deputy fire chief came to me one day and said, "Chris, what are we doing wrong here? We seem to be hiring the wrong people." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Over the last 20 years, we saw 1 or 2 people get stressed and take time off." He said, "Over the last 18 months, I've had 9 people go off and stress, and 7 of them were 6 years or less on the job." And so he was basically saying, there's something wrong with the hiring process. Right. We're hiring the wrong people. They can't take this. And at the time, I had no idea. I didn't have an answer for him. But a couple of years later, I started to realize that was just a new generation of younger people. Sure. Who, and the fire service is so far behind. We never talked about mental illness, but they were already seemed to be getting mental illness training before they came here. Wow. They could almost like they were more aware and they got identified early. So I noticed that each of those people all came back to the job. Yeah. They took time off, they got help, they came back. Whereas in the past, that didn't happen. You were on for 25 years, you had something the stress was too much and you never came back again. Wow.
Your own situation, you've been here obviously for how many years total as a firefighter?
25.
25 years.
Yeah.
25 years ago when you first started, and we talk about how, sharing your feelings, and there's some stuff going on that maybe you weren't quite happy with the way you were feeling. Was it ingrained in you even growing up as a kid and through high school and everything else? You're a man, suck it up, buttercup. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how initially you thought that was the proper way to deal with things?
Yeah, I had a very traditional relationship with my father. I still do. He didn't come out and say, men don't cry or share their feelings and stuff like that. But there was never any. If I was looking at it through my father's eyes or my father's lens or my grandfather, if I could go back and have the privilege to speak to him again, was mental health even something that they were even aware of? Uh-huh. My dad, spent 35 years working for Stelco. They didn't have employee family assistance programs. They didn't have mental health benefits. So you just found, it was natural for you to find your own coping strategies, right? We didn't have the resources that were available anymore.
But on that point, when coping strategies, and part of our conversation will be not only dealing with the traumas, but the day-to-day stuff. But when you saw something that you knew that was really upsetting, whatever it was, and you've seen some horrendous things, how did you deal with it then, as opposed to obviously now?
Thankfully, I have, it's a great question, because I do remember often when I teach or I facilitate conversations with other organizations, I often go back to the history. I said, I remember when I first started as a firefighter, I remember the first traumatic call that I went to. I won't get into the details, but I remember at the end of it, the captain that I had at the time, and, you know, there's almost this paternal relationship with your first captain.
Right.
He's the one that's going to take care of you.
Right.
And I remember at the end of it, we were moving back into the truck, and he looked back at me and he said, "You're okay with this, right?" Well, what are you going to tell that person that you're putting all your trust in? You're making an impression as a new firefighter. You want to be accepted. The reality was, no, I wasn't. What I saw was horrible.
Sure.
But generally speaking, most people have healthy or good coping strategies, exercise, you know, talking to someone. And I have a very supportive wife who I talked a little bit about. And it didn't move into something that I needed any additional support.
Right.
But what about that person that did? You know, the way we used to answer those questions, or the way we asked that, "You're okay with this, right?" I mean, it's a leading question. It almost implies, I want you to say yes, because I really don't want to have this conversation with you. And quite frankly, I understand why, because the captain at the time didn't have the training
to deal with
have a conversation with a new firefighter, because he has been dealing with it in his own way. We were never trained as officers, as firefighters, to have these types of conversations with each other, right? You just internalize it, or we use black humor sometimes to deal with it. And while it may be appropriate in the firehouse from time to time, it's certainly not the only solution. And so we can't just rely on black humor to get through difficult situations. Sometimes we actually need to leverage the resources and the support that's out there in the community in order to move forward past whatever it is that we're experiencing.
Even though the disease took him, and in that moment it wasn't really him choosing to end his life, there were little things that he did to help make it a little less hard for me to find him. And so I felt I've changed things in this house, but the thought of packing up all of our memories and all of our life so far was a lot harder than working through the emotions of having him in this house still.
And from something horrible comes something good. Our friends at CMHA Halton are the recipients of money that you and your team raise every year. You started a golf tournament.
I did.
A lot of work involved in planning anything. Tell us that thought concept, how it started, a number of years, and how much money you've raised.
Actually, it started, the idea actually started from a good friend of mine, the late Jane Cooper. She had actually convinced me to run a charity gala the year after he had passed away. And so we had done Take Off Your Mask for Mental Health up at Carmen's for New Year's Eve. And it was a great success. It was similar idea. We had a gala, we had a raffle, raised about $3,000, I think, that year for CMHA. But then we decided that wasn't really something, a New Year's Eve gala wasn't something that we could sustain year after year.
Correct.
So we kind of switched to we decided to switch to something more that maybe Tom's friends would be more able to come to regularly as well.
Right.
And so that's where we kind of came to the idea of the golf tournament. So we started Tee Off for Mental Health. This will be our 9th year now that we've been running it. And it started with 32 golfers our first year, and now we've just been continuing to grow and grow and grow. The last few years we've had over 100 golfers attending, and then we have other people, because we also do a dinner gala reception afterwards. So we have people that can come and join for dinner on its own as well. So over the last 8 years so far, we've raised over $84,000 for CMHA.
Wow. If you're working and you see that Andrew is off, he's not himself, not on a daily basis, but after maybe 2 or 3 weeks, you just notice that there's something wrong. Is there a fine line where you're asking because you're concerned, and that line is also really, Andrew could say, "I'm fine, it's none of your business, go away"?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Generally, I am concerned.
Right.
It's not just a job.
Right.
We're all friends.
Right.
We're living here together, so it's a genuine concern. But I don't think I've ever had, I guess I probably don't ask enough, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm still very old-fashioned.
Right.
And I'm still trying to come around. I have my own problems that I will not seek help for.
Okay.
So it's difficult for me to ask, and I do ask.
Right.
But you're right. If he comes back, he says no, I'm good. I usually leave it alone unless I see it's very clear. It's affecting the whole group.
Sure.
Then I will contact someone within, like yourself, or we have others.
Right. I think it's interesting what Chris said there, because everybody's journey is different. It's not like this whole department or all of our members from our association all of a sudden immediately made the switch.
Right.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's some things that, okay, I'm not there yet. Others were completely comfortable having these conversations.
Sure.
And I had conversations with Paul about peer support just prior to you gentlemen showing up. These are conversations we never would have had 10, 15 years ago, right? Yeah, like we're literally talking about what's going on in our lives, and this is stuff that never happened before. Would you agree?
I agree, but I do believe for this job you need thick skin as well.
Yeah.
And it's something you don't know until you do it.
Right. Yeah.
Until you experience some bad calls and things. But it all depends on the individual, how they're affected by these bad calls too. And if somebody's affected by them, they should seek help. For sure, and talk about it. You shouldn't carry it with you.
It's a big burden to have on your shoulders.
Exactly.
You have a big enough burden as it is, trying to protect and save, fighting fires, saving people if that's the situation. You don't need that extra burden on top of you.
And as a crew, we all kind of look out for each other too, and you can tell when somebody's off.
Sure.
Saying too. Yeah, and we talk to each other, and we're pretty close. And I think people shit has happened too, where mental health is in the forefront.
Right.
Yeah, and it's
There's a stigma when it comes to mental health. When it comes to breaking that stigma, what do you think is the best way or the best conversations to have in order to start breaking those walls down?
So there's a whole bunch of, to break down stigma, we have to change the culture within any organization, right? Culture is where it starts. I was I think the easiest way to sort of break it down, and when I'm teaching, sometimes I use this as an example. There's an author called John Gordon. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of him. He wrote a book called The Coffee Bean.
Okay.
And I'll show you, it's a really neat analogy. So he uses this analogy that you have a pot of boiling water, okay? And you put an egg in that boiling water. What happens to the egg? It gets hardened.
Yeah.
It gets hardened to its
right.
environment, right? Well, what happens when you put a carrot in that egg?
Gets
Or
soft.
put a carrot in that boiling water?
Yeah, it gets soft.
It gets soft. It gets mushy and falls apart. But what happens when you put a coffee bean in that boiling water?
Makes coffee.
Turns it into magic. What I'm showing is that the egg and the carrot are products of their environment.
Right.
But the coffee bean changes the environment. It reacts
sense.
with its environment. So his purpose is saying, be the coffee bean, right? Don't get hardened, don't become soft, but actually change it. You can't change your environment, but you can have a positive impact on it.
Sure.
And that's what I love about that. And so that's what we're doing. And then the best way to do that, to answer your question, is to have those conversations. Share your stories. It's important for me, 25 years on the job, to talk about my difficult experiences on the job, but not just the calls, again, because this isn't about bad calls all the time. This is about, 29 years of marriage. This is about raising two young men, in this world, and sharing it with other firefighters that might be experiencing. So don't be afraid to share that, I haven't been 100% all of the time, but that's what's created my resilience. That's what's been able to allow me to speak so openly and passionately about mental health.
Exactly.
We have to start treating our mental health the same way we treat our physical health. One of the best examples, because, we need black and white examples in the fire service, right? That's how we work, right?
Yeah.
Men in general, we need that, right?
Exactly.
It needs to be, how many people, I usually say, how many people here go and see a doctor on a regular basis for a checkup?
Yeah.
It's pretty common, isn't it? Yeah. And most people put up their hand and they say, well, why do you do that? Well, it's preventative maintenance, a healthy thing to do. Good. How many people here go and see a dentist once or twice a year? Oh, yeah, for sure. Why? Well, we only get one set, right? It's healthy.
Yeah.
It's preventative maintenance. How many people here change the oil in their vehicle every 5,000 or 10,000 kilometers? Of course.
Everybody.
You know, our fathers told us, you know, you want to take care of this vehicle, you want to make it last, change the oil.
Yeah.
How many people here go and see a mental health professional once a year for a checkup from the neck up?
Zip.
Nobody. We've been taught to use professionals in every other aspect of our life.
Right.
Our financial health, we use financial planners.
Yep.
We use doctors, we use dentists, we use mechanics. But when it comes to the most important organ in our body, our minds, it's almost like we are at a giant Yurka tournament saying, you know what, Mike, I'm gonna go this one alone. Like for some reason, I can magically download a PhD or master's in psychology.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Good point.
And the reason being is because we've always been taught to look at our physical health proactively. We were dragged to the dentist. We were told to take care of, be proactive with your financial plan, your financial future. But never up until recently have we actually started talking proactively and open and honestly about mental health. You had to be in full crisis before you would ever even consider going and seeing someone. And the Working Mind program really helps normalize those conversations.
Right.
It really puts it in perspective. It's such a concise program that is so easy to understand, and we use it as baseline. In fact, all of our new recruits for the last 5 years, day 2 is going through the Working Mind program. Before they even begin anything, before they pick up a hose, pick up a medical bag, before they put a gear on, you're learning about mental health and how to support your own mental health and how to support each other. We're taking a leadership role in the community now. Last year, we hosted what's called a Headstrong Summit. The firefighters went out to, we got the Burlington Convention Center.
Right.
We brought 180 students from all the high schools in Burlington.
Right.
And we led breakout sessions about talking about mental health. Basically what we were trying to do, what we did, is what we're trying to accomplish is those peer-to-peer conversations, we're promoting them to do it at the grassroots level at the high school. We're taking the leaders in the high schools and we're getting them to, we're showing what we've done. If we can make these changes in our industry, you can certainly do it. And we empower these student leaders to go back and make change within their own schools.
And on that note, we'll remind you that help is available. If somebody that you know is struggling, reach out, because you are not in this alone. Derek, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Appreciate it.
Great.
A big thank you to all our sponsors, and a special shout out to our title sponsor, Brain Armor. Don't forget to visit brainarmor.com and use the promo code RISE and THRIVE for an exclusive 50% discount on your purchase. For more updates and to stay in the loop on upcoming episodes, be sure to subscribe to our website at riseandthrivepodcast.ca. We're grateful for your support and look forward to sharing more inspiring stories with you. Until next time, keep thriving.